Ladies and gentlemen, my brothers and sisters, have you ever felt like your prayers were hitting the ceiling? Like the promises spoken over your life were buried beneath the weight of your struggles? Have you ever looked at your life and wondered, God, where are you? What are you doing? Let me tell you something. You may not see it, you may not feel it, but God is moving. Even in the silence, even in the waiting, even in the darkest, most painful moments of your life, heaven is working overtime on your behalf. I know the enemy has tried to convince you that your story is over, that your breakthrough is denied, that your destiny has been delayed. But listen to me, God never stops working. He is orchestrating, aligning, shifting, and setting things in motion that your eyes have not seen, your ears have not heard, and your mind cannot even begin to imagine. So don't you dare give up now. Don't you dare throw in the towel, because what God is doing behind the scenes is far greater than what the enemy is trying to do in plain sight. Your season of revelation is coming. Your moment of divine manifestation is on the way. Stay ready, stay expectant, because when God pulls back the curtain, you're going to stand in awe of what He has been preparing for you all along. There are moments in life when it feels like nothing is happening. You pray, you fast, you declare the promises of God, but all you hear is silence. You look around and it seems like everyone else is moving forward while you're stuck in the same place. The enemy whispers in your ear, telling you that God has forgotten you, that your prayers have been ignored, that your faithfulness has been in vain. But let me remind you, God is always working, even when you can't see it. Think about a seed buried in the soil. When you plant it, you don't see anything happening. Day after day, you water it, and the ground looks the same. There's no visible proof that anything is changing beneath the surface. But deep in the soil, beyond what the human eye can perceive, the seed is breaking open. Roots are stretching down, and something is beginning to take shape. Just because you can't see the process doesn't mean the process isn't happening. And just because you can't see God moving doesn't mean He isn't orchestrating something powerful in your life. When the Israelites stood at the Red Sea with Pharaoh's army pressing behind them, they couldn't see a way forward. Fear gripped their hearts, and some even wished they had stayed in bondage rather than face the uncertainty ahead. But what they didn't know was that God was already working. Long before they arrived at the water's edge, He had set a plan in motion. The wind was already stirring. The waters were already preparing to part. Their deliverance was in motion before they even knew they needed it. God was working behind the scenes. Joseph spent years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. From the outside, it looked like he had been forgotten, like his dreams had been shattered. But in the unseen realm, God was aligning every event, every encounter, every disappointment to position him for the palace. What looked like a setback was actually a setup. And in one moment, everything shifted. He went from the prison to the palace because God had been working all along. God is not limited by what you see. His power is not confined to what your natural eyes can perceive. He is moving in ways beyond your understanding, shifting things, opening doors, and preparing breakthroughs that you don't even know you need yet. Just because you don't feel progress doesn't mean there isn't progress. Just because the situation looks still doesn't mean God isn't stirring things beneath the surface. Consider a caterpillar inside a cocoon. From the outside, it appears motionless. It seems trapped, stuck in a dark and confined place. But inside, transformation is happening. Wings are forming, strength is being built, and in the right moment, what was hidden will be revealed. The caterpillar doesn't stay in the cocoon forever. There comes a moment when the process is complete and what was once crawling emerges flying. God is working on your behalf in ways you cannot comprehend. He is behind the scenes, arranging divine connections, shifting circumstances, and making a way where there seems to be no way. Just because you can't see the blueprint doesn't mean the construction isn't happening. Just because the stage looks empty doesn't mean the performance hasn't begun. The curtain hasn't been lifted yet. But when it does, you will stand in awe of what God has been preparing all along. There is nothing more frustrating than waiting when you know God has spoken a word over your life, when you have prayed, when you have believed, but nothing seems to be happening. It's easy to start questioning whether you heard him correctly. You see others stepping into their breakthroughs, doors opening for them, while you're still in the same place, wondering if your time will ever come. But what we must understand is that God's delays are not his denials. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to happen. God's timing is always perfect. Abraham was given a promise that he would be the father of many nations. But years passed and nothing changed. His body grew older. Sarah remained barren and doubt crept in. He tried to take matters into his own hands, thinking maybe God needed his help to bring the promise to pass. But God had already set the appointed time. Isaac was not born a moment too soon or a moment too late. He came when God had ordained. The delay wasn't a denial. It was preparation for something greater than Abraham could have imagined. David was anointed as king when he was just a boy, yet he spent years running from Saul, hiding in caves and facing battles that seemed to have nothing to do with the throne he had been promised. It would have been easy for him to become frustrated, to wonder why God would anoint him and then make him wait. But every battle, every trial, every moment in the wilderness was preparing him. He wasn't just waiting, he was being developed. When the time came for him to take the throne, he was ready. The delay was never about denial. It was about refining, strengthening, and equipping him for what was ahead. So often we assume that waiting means wasting time, but in God's kingdom, waiting is never wasted. There is a process happening in the waiting. God is working things out in you and around you that you may not understand yet. What looks like a delay is often protection. What feels like a setback is often positioning. If God gave you the blessing too soon, you might not be ready to carry it. If he opened the door before the right time, you might walk through it unprepared. His timing ensures that when the moment comes, you will be fully equipped to handle what he has for you. Think about Joseph, who had a dream of leadership but spent years as a slave and a prisoner. If he had been elevated too soon, he wouldn't have been ready for the weight of ruling a nation. But in the waiting, he learned stewardship, wisdom, patience, and trust in God. By the time he was promoted, he had the character and the discernment to lead with integrity. The delay was not a denial, it was part of the preparation. There are times when it feels like God is holding something back from you, but he is actually holding it for you until the right moment. The promise is not forgotten. The vision is not abandoned. The prayer has not been ignored. What God spoke will come to pass, but it will come to pass in his time, not yours. His delays are not meant to discourage you, but to develop you. The waiting season is where faith is strengthened, character is built, and purpose is refined. The enemy will try to convince you that a delay means God has changed his mind, but God does not operate on human timelines. What he has planned will unfold exactly when it is meant to, and nothing can stop it. There are moments in life when the weight of trials feels unbearable. The struggle is real, the pain is deep, and the journey seems never ending. You cry out to God, wondering why you have to go through so much, why the road is so difficult, why the doors keep closing instead of opening. The enemy tries to convince you that you are suffering for no reason, that your hardship is pointless, that your dreams are slipping away. But what you don't realize is that your struggles are setting the stage for your breakthrough. Every tear, every challenge, every setback is working together to position you for something greater. Joseph had a dream that he would one day lead, that he would rise above his brothers, that he was destined for greatness. But before he ever saw the fulfillment of that dream, he was betrayed, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit. From the outside, it looked like everything was going wrong. It seemed as if his life was moving further away from his destiny rather than toward it. But what Joseph didn't know was that every painful moment was part of the process. The betrayal positioned him. The pit was not his final destination. The prison was not his ending. God was using each trial to develop him, to refine his character, and to prepare him for the palace. What looked like a series of defeats was actually a setup for the fulfillment of his dream. When the Israelites were trapped between Pharaoh's army and the Red Sea, they thought their journey was over. They had just been set free, and now it looked like they were about to be destroyed. Fear gripped their hearts, and they cried out, believing that their struggle was leading to their downfall. But God was about to use that very situation to demonstrate his power in a way they had never seen before. He split the sea, made a way where there was no way, and defeated their enemies right before their eyes. What they thought would be their destruction became their deliverance. The struggle set the stage for their breakthrough. David was anointed king as a young man, yet he spent years running for his life, hiding in caves and fighting battles that seemed to have nothing to do with the throne. He could have given up, believing that the promise over his life was never going to come to pass. But every struggle he endured, every challenge he faced, every hardship he overcame was shaping him into the leader he was destined to be. The rejection, the battles, the loneliness, none of it was wasted. It was all part of his preparation. By the time he stepped into his destiny, he wasn't just a king by title. He was a king in character, in wisdom, and in faith. What you are facing right now is not meant to destroy you. It is meant to strengthen you. The hardship is stretching your faith. The obstacles are building your endurance, and the trials are shaping you for something greater. When God is getting ready to elevate you, he first equips you. When he is preparing to bless you, he first refines you. The struggles you face today are setting the stage for the testimony you will share tomorrow. What the enemy meant for evil, God is turning for your good. The pain is not wasted, the waiting is not pointless, and the process is not in vain. Your breakthrough is coming, and when it does, you will look back and realize that every struggle was necessary for where God was taking you. There are times in life when the enemy comes against you with everything he has. The attacks feel relentless, the opposition grows stronger, and it seems like every time you take a step forward, something pulls you 2 steps back. You start to wonder if you will ever see the promises of God come to pass, if the dream he placed in your heart will ever become a reality. The enemy wants you to believe that the obstacles in front of you are stronger than the purpose inside of you. He wants you to think that the delays, the disappointments, and the detours have the power to cancel what God has spoken over your life. But the truth is, no attack from the enemy can stop the divine plan of God. Look at Job. He was a righteous man, faithful to God, yet he faced unimaginable suffering. He lost everything: his family, his wealth, his health. The enemy came at him from every direction, trying to break him, trying to make him curse God, trying to make him believe that it was over. But what the enemy failed to understand was that God had already written Job's story. The suffering was not the end. The loss was not the final chapter. God had a plan to restore Job, to give him back double for everything he had lost. The attack could not stop the blessing that was already in motion. Joseph's brothers tried to destroy him. They threw him into a pit, sold him into slavery, and thought they had erased his destiny. Potiphar's wife falsely accused him, sending him to prison. It seemed like every time he got close to something good, the enemy found a way to knock him back down. But what they didn't know was that their very actions were pushing Joseph closer to his purpose. Every betrayal, every false accusation, every injustice was positioning him for the palace. The enemy's attacks did not cancel God's plan. They became a part of the process to fulfill it. When Jesus was nailed to the cross, the enemy thought he had won. He thought he had stopped the Son of God from completing his mission. But what Satan didn't realize was that the cross was not the end. It was the very thing that would lead to the greatest victory in history. The enemy thought he was sealing Jesus' fate, but in reality, he was setting up his own defeat. 3 days later, Jesus rose from the grave, proving once and for all that the power of God cannot be stopped. Whatever the enemy is throwing at you right now, whatever battles you are facing, know this: God's plan for your life is still intact. The attacks may come, the opposition may rise, but none of it can override what God has already ordained. If he has spoken it, it will come to pass. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. No scheme of the enemy can rewrite what God has already written. The enemy tries to use hardship to break you, but God uses it to build you. The enemy sends opposition to stop you, but God allows it to strengthen you. What was meant to discourage you will be the very thing that elevates you. What was meant to defeat you will be the very thing that propels you into your destiny. The storm may rage, but it cannot sink what God has set afloat. The enemy's attacks may be fierce, but they will never be stronger than the hand of God on your life. There is something powerful about expectation. When you live with expectation, you position yourself for what God is about to do. The enemy works overtime to make you doubt, to make you weary, to make you question whether God will come through. He wants you to lose your hope, to grow tired of waiting, to stop believing that the promises over your life will come to pass. But the people who see the move of God are the ones who refuse to give up. They keep standing, they keep trusting, they keep expecting, because when the time is right, God will reveal what he has been doing behind the scenes. Noah was told to build an ark when there was no sign of rain. Day after day he worked, holding on to nothing but the word of God. People mocked him. The skies stayed clear, but Noah didn't stop. He didn't quit because he understood something. Just because he couldn't see the storm coming didn't mean it wasn't on the way. And when the first drop of rain fell, it was too late for those who doubted. The flood came, and Noah was prepared because he had stayed expectant. Elijah stood on Mount Carmel in the middle of a drought and declared that rain was coming, but when his servant went to look, there was nothing but clear skies. Elijah sent him back again. Still nothing. He sent him back a third time, a fourth time, a fifth time, a sixth time. Still nothing. Most people would have given up. Most people would have started doubting, but Elijah knew the sound of rain before he ever saw a single cloud. He refused to stop believing just because the evidence hadn't shown up yet. And on the seventh time, his servant returned with news. There was a cloud the size of a man's hand. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Because when you stay expectant, you don't need to see the whole storm. You just need a sign that God is moving. Paul and Silas sat in a prison cell, beaten and chained with no logical way out. But instead of giving in to despair, they began to praise. They worshiped in the middle of the night, not because their circumstances had changed, but because they knew who their God was. They understood that just because they were in chains didn't mean they were defeated, and suddenly the earth shook. The prison doors flew open and their chains fell off. Their breakthrough came because they refused to stop believing. Waiting on God is not a passive act. It is an active stance of faith. It is standing firm when everything around you says to quit. It is choosing to believe when your emotions tell you otherwise. It is waking up every day with the expectation that today could be the day God shifts everything. The woman with the issue of blood pushed through the crowd, refusing to be denied, believing that if she could just touch the hem of his garment, she would be healed. Blind Bartimaeus refused to stay silent when Jesus walked by, crying out even louder when people told him to stop. They didn't wait for their miracle to come to them. They reached out in faith and grabbed hold of it. God moves in the lives of those who refuse to let go of their expectation. The breakthrough you have been praying for is not just a possibility, it is a certainty in the hands of God. The waiting may be long, the journey may be hard, but those who stay expectant will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. God has not forgotten what he has spoken over your life, and when the time is right, you will see the manifestation of his promise.